Hi everyone, welcome to the Gigabyte Aorus X299 Gaming 7 motherboard review. Again, welcome, and if you are interested, I have already done a full preview of the motherboard, so it shows you around, or where all the fan headers are and the lights a little bit more and stuff like that, and I will put the link in a thing above, and I'll also put it below as well so that you can go and have a look at that, and we'll keep this more about the performance and my thoughts about the board. Now, this is the first of the X299 boards that I've had with the additional heatsink round the side, and essentially what it is with X299 you've only got that small real estate at the top that you can really get a heatsink in. So then what the manufacturers have done with this one is run a heat pipe off somewhere, maybe even multiple places. So with the Gigabyte board there's a heat pipe that runs over towards the I/O at the back of the board, and there's actually a massive heatsink hidden underneath the plastic over there. Now sometimes heat pipe cooling cannot be that great, and the heat pipe on this actually only does go halfway down the heatsink, but there's a heatsink there, and it's definitely, when we've been talking about VRM heat problems in the past, it's definitely where it should make a fairly decent amount of difference. Now the other thing that I can talk to you about, because I've done quite a bit of VRM testing on the other boards, is I'm actually quite glad that the Gigabyte ended up falling down the list a little bit more, because I did do their ITX board over doing this board. It was something that Gigabyte said to me, we prefer to do the Ryzen one first. So I was like, okay. But what it has meant is it's meant I've been able to do more other boards to be able to compare it to, because it's a waste of time of doing this one literally first out of the box, and then I wouldn't have known whether it was cooler or not. So I've done OCCT tests and I've done some prime tests. Now the prime tests, there are 3 different versions of prime, and a lot of people have been saying recently like, oh, if your rig doesn't pass prime, it's been around years, it should do. And that would be the original one, which is 26.6. But there are 2 others, and you've got version 28.1 and then version 29.2. 28 has AVX in it, 29 has AVX 512 in it. And the difference that makes upon a CPU is massive, absolutely massive. Now what you do need to remember is to get them to go full bore with an overclock in tow, you pretty much have to turn every possible safety precaution and everything off. And this is one of the reasons why in the BIOS there is an AVX setting where you can set a lower clock, and then all it does is when you run an AVX based program or benchmark or stress test, the system just sees the AVX and it will then set the CPU back a little bit lower, helps keep your temps down, and it can stop the overcurrent protection. So with the graph up, essentially the missing results here, with the Gigabyte it was because it was an overcurrent protection and the board was just shutting down instantly. Now I did go into the BIOS and I made every change that I possibly could do. I tried everything. There just isn't a way with the current BIOS that I use, and it was the one from the Gigabyte website, which is F7i. There was no way I could stop it from powering off, and it was overcurrent. It wasn't a instability or anything else, because you can tell by the fact that it passed the 26.6 and it didn't the others. Some of the other ones that I got zeros in the graph, it may have been because it had gone over 105 degrees, because some boards you can turn off all those settings entirely, and then you do just get to the point where things just get really warm and start throttling. But with the Prime 95, if you look at the stock test, and it's probably just going to be the stock test that I'll do, you can see here that with the 28 and 29, compared to the Asus Prime Pro, which is just above it, it's 20 degrees difference just on the VRMs. Now something I can tell you is that the CPU temperatures were actually a bit lower as well compared to some of the other testing that I've done in the past. So it probably helps with a bit of heat soak as well. Now talking about overclocking, we did, my CPU will do 4.6 gigahertz at 1.235 volts, 100% stable, every benchmark. With stress testing, with the right board, with the right things turned off, it will pass the higher end primes as well. You only get an issue then with the VRMs getting hot and things start to throttle, but it is stable. So it's a bit of a complicated one, but then again, this does, the platform does seem to just be that way. With the Gigabyte, I couldn't turn any of those things off. Also, I couldn't get 4.6 stable, and it got to the point that I was increasing volts to try and find the stability, and it was then just causing me thermal issues. So what I had to do was I dropped back to 4.5, and I did get that stable, but it actually still needed 1.22 volts to keep that overclock stable. So it needed a little bit more volts for a lower overclock. So I was a little bit, kind of iffy with that, because normally the CPU with other boards, it'll do it below 1.2 volts at 4.5. So it is needing a little bit more volts, and I did start to think, have we got some voltage fluctuation going on? Is there a bit of V-droop? The problem is none of the BIOSes so far that Gigabyte have released have had a way for any of the programs to be able to see the vCore. It's actually reading the VC in voltage rather than the vCore voltage. So if you look in CPU-Z, hardware info, all of the vCore results are the VC in. The only real one that you can get any information from is the VID, but the problem is with the VID, that's pretty much just registering what you've set you want the voltages to be. So it hasn't been great. Now, I hope Gigabyte get this fixed, because something I will say is we've had a lot of concern with Gigabyte voltage fluctuation on all platforms. So the fact that this is kind of hidden raises eyebrows. So I hope Gigabyte get it sorted, because I'll be honest with you, this is probably the one thing, other than the overclock being a little bit lower for whatever reason that was, the overclock being lower and the vCore voltage are the only bad things I have to say. So it's kind of a couple of little things that they need to fix, and then it's genuinely an epic board. So that's going to give you a hint to, well, we'll just say now, we're going to give it the Enthusiast Award, because to be honest with you, that the heatsink for the VRMs has made a huge difference. And I can bring up the next graph, and this is OCCT. Now you can see with OCCT, there's the overclock actually sits there below the stock temperatures for the Asus TUF board. Now we have done a lot more testing, and you can go and see on the OC3D website if you want to go and have a look at all of the pages and all of the graphs. And I'm flicking stuff up to the right so that you can see. Don't forget you can pause if you want to flick through. I mean, we do a Blender run now. It's a custom Blender run with 3 million polygons through it, just so that we are doing some real world stuff as well. We're doing HEVC testing on multiple resolutions as well. So there's lots of stuff that we're ploughing through to try and give you more real world tests, which, let's face it, if you're on something like this, you're going to want to know about calculations, and you're going to want to know how it renders and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, those two small things, now the voltage is a small thing, but to be honest with you, because of Gigabyte's track history with literally everything that they've made, probably in the last, at least the last 8 months, but probably even going back a little bit further, it's something that I wanted to pay attention to. So I'm going to kind of err on the side of, being positive with this one and hope that they've done it right, but you can bet your bottom dollar if they release a BIOS and it's not right, then this video is going to have stuff popping up all over it, and I'll be putting stuff on the website. I hope it's not them trying to cover their tracks, and hope people just aren't going to notice. But let's face it, this is me, I've brought it up, and they probably are going to have a fit anyway. If they do send me one and it's good, I will also add that in the description underneath. So if you're watching this and it's a few months later, that's where to look, and I will also put it in the overclocking section on the website. But performance was great. Temperatures, CPU temperatures, have been affected by that extra heatsink for the VRM. It's kept the VRM temps down, and I would say we were probably experiencing at least 5 degrees lower CPU temperatures with this one. If you're running that massive overclock though, or you are going to run a massive overclock, and you want to use one of the newer versions of Prime, or you are using a program that has AVX in it, then you will need to not only have your normal overclock, but you will have to set the lower clock for the AVX. It's just a multiplier setting. So if you've got 45 as your maximum CPU overclock, you're probably going to be looking to set 40 or 42 for your AVX, just to keep things that little bit lower, because if not, it will just shut off. So if you've been trying to do something like this and you think your overclock's unstable because it's instantly powering down the second that you hit go, it's probably not an unstable overclock, and just the fact that the overcurrent protection is just going panic off, and that's all it's doing. And there doesn't seem to be a way around that again in the current BIOS at the moment. They do probably need just an OCP like disabled enabled auto button to go in the BIOS. It's a bit of a faff with some of the others, but you can get around it with the others, which is, or at least you can get around it with the Asus boards. So it's something, I understand why it's there, but it's just, I know there's a lot of people going on and about Prime all the time. But it looks good, you've got the RGB all over it, and I actually do like that. You can obviously turn it off if you don't, but if you do like the lights, there's plenty of it, and like I said, I actually like it. Some of the other manufacturers always go, oh yeah, it's the Christmas tree boards, but I like it, and used in the right way, I think it can be a good addition as well. It's also got the heatsink at the bottom of the chipset for your M.2. That actually works really well as well, and to the point where 8 degrees off of like a high-end run using Crystal Dismark over and over and over again on my MP500. In normal use, it doesn't do a great deal because you need to stress them to warm them up to that point to be able to see the difference. In normal use, do you know what I mean? It might be like a degree or two, but I think it looks quite pretty. But you do still have the other options on the board where if you'd rather just see your M.2 and display the fact that you may have spent, I don't know, 500 quid or £1,000 on a massive Samsung one, then you've still got those options as well. And you've also got the option, you don't need to have it underneath your GPU, where there are multiple places that you can put it. You can have it above the GPU, just below the CPU heatsink, or your M.2, or your water cooling heatsink, whatever, and you can put them on display. So they've ticked a lot of boxes with that. So really, it's a positive thing, and I'm saying it's a positive thing because I'm hoping and praying that they've not hidden that VCore stuff on purpose. But I've spoken to Gigabyte, I asked Gigabyte, I gave them a chance to reply about it, and it just got to the point where I didn't have enough time to wait any longer for them to get back to me about it. So like I said, if they do reply and the motherboard is still in the test rig, then I will test it quickly and I will report back. But if, you know, it's all going to come down to time at the end of the day. I have other stuff to do and I can't just fit boards in when I have like other new platforms to be getting on with. So lots of results on the website, lots of results here. It's actually a pretty great board. Yes, it's probably been a bit shorter than you may have been prepared for, but at the end of the day, the main point was the VRMs, and that extra heatsink has made a massive difference as far as I'm concerned. So props to Gigabyte for doing it properly, and let's hope the rest of it all follows suit. So for now at least, this has been the tiniest of Logans with the OC3D Enthusiast award-winning Aorus Gaming 7.